So let's go over how to set materials in Lumion. It's really easy. If you just make sure you're on the materials palette down here, you can select anything that you have assigned a material to from Rhino, and you will be applying the material to the entire layer. So not just one object, but everything that is associated with that layer. So if we go over here to this asphalt, and I'll just show you what happens. So when you select any of your objects or layers in Lumion, when you're in material mode, it's going to bring up this dialog box, and you start out here with this new material, and this has a whole bunch of options. I would just ignore all of those for now. Right now it's just showing the imported material that it came in as. If you go to various, this is where a lot of the landscape materials are. So this has 2D grasses, which is basically a map of grasses. There's also 3D grass, which can be really memory intensive. So I would use that really selectively as you're building up your views. There's also a space where there's a bunch of different rock textures. There's soil, which has sand and soil and dirt and gravel and other really useful landscape elements. This is the water category, and this also has a whole bunch of different types of water that you can apply within different surfaces of your model. There's wood. Now this is more like bark and wood chips and things like that. There's another category for wood in the indoor and outdoor materials as well. So if you're looking for wood planks, they're not in here, but you would find bark, wood chips, and these log textures. There's also leaves, and these are again a 3D texture. So I'm just going to do a little quick demo here. If I wanted to make this into like a vegetated ground cover area, I would click here, go to various, click on leaves, and then select one of these textures. And you can see it kind of like makes it 3D. So you see the ground cover element itself. And if you click on the material again, it will bring up a more detailed dialog box where you can control elements of the materiality. So you can change the spread, the size of the leaves, the type of the leaves, and the spread pattern offset. But I usually just leave things as default unless I really need to change them. But you can kind of go through and see how those are working yourself. I'll use this little patch as a testing ground for some of the other materials. So for 2D grasses, you can go through and see, but like, you know, it's not very detailed. You have to zoom in quite a bit to see the detailed texture on that. So you can go through and see different materials and how they impact the space. Keep in mind that once you've applied a material, if you click on it again, it will bring up a more detailed box where you can control things like the colorization, which you could change by clicking on the color and selecting something from this color wheel. The gloss, which is how much inherent gloss the object has. The reflectivity, which for grass, for example, would be pretty low. But if this was a glass object, it might be quite high. The relief pattern and the scale. So if we wanted to make this bigger, we could do that. If we wanted to make it smaller, we can use this sliding bar to decrease the scale. There's other options down here, but for now, I would just go through and familiarize yourself with some of these textures that are available. And now I'll just show you what's in the indoor and outdoor section. So indoor, we have fabric, glass, leather, metal, plaster, curtains, wood, tiles, stone, and plastics. Not very many of these are applicable for exterior rendering, but there are a few that I use from time to time. For example, with fabric, if I have like umbrellas or canopies with like a canvas texture, I will kind of look and see if I can use one of these fabrics. I think there's like a linen somewhere here. Yeah, this one, the linen texture, I've used that for umbrellas. I don't use any of the interior glasses. I always use the outdoor glass, and I'll show you those in a second. Never use leather, sometimes use metal. These are just more highly refined metal objects, so they're really, really hyper shiny and reflective. So those aren't super applicable unless you have something like a metal sculpture, for example, that is really highly reflective. Let's just say, for example, this is a sheet of metal for some reason. Then you would see this basically creates a mirror-like object. It does have a slight texture to it. So if I change that to the other one, it changes the tone and coloration. If I put it to chrome, it's really, really highly reflective. So for Alex, who wanted a reflective roof surface on his underpass, this is how he would have applied that material to that. Now, if you ever want to get back to the way a material was when you first imported it, you can just go back to the new panel and click on imported material, and it will return it back to its original state. Otherwise, in indoor, I don't really use any of these. I sometimes use plastic for play equipment. Like, for example, if there's like an EPDM surface that's modulated, then I'll look for one of the like rubber or linoleum things here. And keep in mind that for anything in Lumion, once you apply the material and click on it again, you can really customize it a lot. So you don't have to take as default the colors that are provided. You can always like change those yourself if you want to, and you can change the scale and how things look. So in outdoor, I use quite a few of these bricks, concrete, and stone. They are all great resources for various things. For example, paving textures, wall textures, and other building materials. Concrete is obviously gets a lot of use. So this is one of the textures that I like a lot. I guess I'm on this thing right now. So you can see it if you zoom in. That has quite a nice cast concrete texture. This one is a little more gritty. And you can go through and check out all of the textures on your own time. I'm not going to go through all of them, but every potential use of these materials is probably covered in Lumion pretty much for what we need right now. I use exterior glass for windows. I usually just use the glass panels. This first one here, there's a whole bunch of pages of different glass things, but I haven't really found a use for any of them yet, except for maybe the first two glass panels up here. In metal, these I use quite a bit. So for example, for the metal poles here, the flag poles, I would assign those probably this painted metal texture. And if I zoom in, you can see that there is kind of like an imperfection to that texture. So I'll just click on it again, and then I'm going to reduce the scale so it's a little bit tighter. But that's really useful. And what else do I use? There's Corten steel in here. So there's rusted steel down here. And on this page, these Corten steel elements, I use those quite a bit in my views. I also use this stainless cast iron quite a bit as a good like kind of dark reflective material, and this painted black worn metal as well. Wood gets a lot of use from me. Here's where you'll find wood planks or wood decking, as well as wood flooring or siding. So let's say this was going to be a wood deck on the edge of the splash pad. Let me just make this into a splash pad. I'll use water. Maybe a clear pool like this. Yeah. Okay. So let's say we wanted a nice wood deck on the edge of that. This one is a little rustic for me, so I'm going to go with something a little more refined like this. And you can change the orientation by going down to the more options panel down here within the material. And I'm just going to change this so that it suits my view. So you can really customize these materials, rotating them, scaling them up and down if you need to. And this is a great way to sort of make your workflow a lot faster. You don't really have to worry about applying materials to the correct size or scale in Rhino. You can just do it in Lumion. In the asphalt, you can go through again and test out how these look. I like to use the wet asphalt quite a bit for roads. So I'll usually apply that on road surfaces, and then you get kind of a nice reflection. Looks like it's just rained on the asphalt. And I usually just take the scale down a little bit. So I'll let you guys continue exploring the materials in Lumion. But before you do, there's one thing I want to suggest, which is, do you remember how I said that the 3D grasses are really energy intensive? I would consider in your views, now that you have them saved and you know what materials are going to go where, that you do really strategic targeted material application. So let's say, for example, I have a view right on the edge of this area, and I don't want to apply 3D grass to the entire lawn area because I know it's going to take up a lot of memory. So just as a reminder, this is your 3D grass, and if we apply it, it is not just a flat texture, it actually is 3D. So for those of you who aren't reaching the benchmarks or have slow computers, you probably don't want to apply that to this enormous green surface. What I would do is set the material in the foreground differently from the one in the background. So I'll make this my 3D grass, and this is just a small area, so my computer will handle it. And then for the background, I'll use a 2D grass texture, which is a lot easier for my computer to handle and also doesn't really matter because it's in the background. So keep that in mind as you're allocating materials for your views, that you can just go in and add that finer grained level of detail if you need to your material applications. So just because it's lawn doesn't mean it needs to be on the same layer as the other lawn, particularly if you want it to be more detailed in the foreground. So I could change this to my my pink material, which is allocated the 3D grass in Lumion, and keep the rest of it on the lawn layer. And then I can adjust the material detail to my view instead of using up memory applying a material that I'm not really going to see from any other perspective. So really try to be strategic in how you allocate your materials for your views. And if you're having issues with your model being too big for the file to work in, then consider just like reducing it as much as you can.